It began on a quiet evening that felt just like any other. People across the world were living their normal routines, some watching late-night shows, some getting ready for sleep, others working the night shift. No one knew that everything they understood about life, science, and humanity was about to change forever. Far away from cities and noise, in a small observatory station on the edge of a mountain range, a group of researchers were tracking stars, like they did every night. It was peaceful, predictable, almost boring. But then a strange reading appeared on one of the monitors, something so unusual that for a few seconds, the person watching it didn't even react. They simply stared at the screen, waiting for it to correct itself, assuming it was a glitch. But the signal didn't disappear. Instead, it grew clearer, stronger, and more structured, as if someone far away was trying to speak through layers of space dust and distance. The researcher leaned closer, frowned, and called for the others. Soon, every person in the room was staring at the same glowing pattern on the screen, trying to understand what they were seeing. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise. It wasn't anything natural. Someone whispered, "This is not from Earth." They didn't shout. They didn't panic. They just knew. Everyone in that room felt their hearts beat a little faster. They all understood the weight of that moment. For generations, humans had wondered if life existed somewhere else. Some believed, some doubted, and some didn't care. But here it was a message, a real message, reaching them from beyond their world, within. Minutes, phone calls, emails, and emergency alerts spread through scientific networks. The signal was sent to major research centers, cross-checked, verified, and analyzed again and again. And every expert reached the same conclusion. It was artificial. Something intelligent had created it. Someone somewhere was trying to contact. Earth. By early morning, the news had reached government officials. Meetings were called behind closed doors. Security advisors, scientists, and communication specialists gathered around tables, trying to keep calm while discussing the impossible. No one wanted to talk about aliens out loud, but every person in the room was thinking the same thing. They all knew the truth, even without saying it. The signal repeated every 30 minutes. It never changed, never weakened. It was steady and purposeful, as if the sender knew exactly what they were doing. It didn't sound threatening. It didn't sound friendly either. It simply existed, a mystery floating through space, inviting humans to respond. The world hadn't been told yet. News stations had no idea. People were asleep or starting their normal morning routines, completely unaware that history had already changed during the night. But the sky knew, space knew. And soon, everyone would know too. For the next few hours, the brightest minds on the planet worked nonstop. They compared the signal to known radio waves, checked for interference, and even tried decoding it using old linguistic theories. Nothing fully solved it, but one thing became clear. It had patterns too precise to be accidental. The shapes, the timing, the energy output, everything pointed to intelligence. Around midday, something even more shocking happened. Radar systems detected an object entering the outer edges of Earth's neighborhood, far beyond satellites, far beyond the usual range of human spacecraft. It was moving smoothly, steadily, almost gracefully, like it was familiar with the path. But it wasn't a comet, or an asteroid, or anything Earth had launched. It was a vessel. A spacecraft. The same scientists who were studying the signal suddenly saw the impossible on their screens. A craft that seemed to shimmer, as if made from a material no one recognized, was slowing down near the orbit of the moon. No one knew how long it had been traveling, or how it reached the solar system without being detected earlier. But now it was impossible to ignore. Within an hour, governments were in panic mode. World leaders held emergency calls with each other, speaking in serious, controlled tones, trying not to show fear. Space agencies were rushed into action. Military branches were put on alert. Not because humans wanted to fight, but because they didn't know what would happen next. And while officials scrambled to understand the situation, the vessel simply stayed there hovering beyond the moon, as if politely waiting for permission. By evening, the world finally found out. Major news channels interrupted their programming. Social media exploded. People everywhere stared at their screens in disbelief as anchors announced that an unidentified object had entered space near Earth. They didn't use the word alien, but everyone did. It was the only explanation that made sense. Some people were excited, some terrified, some cried, some prayed, and some simply stared at the night sky, wondering if they were being watched. But the truth was even more unbelievable than anyone expected. The next day, early in the morning, the signal changed. It wasn't random anymore. It wasn't a pattern that needed decoding. It became clear, structured, and unmistakably intentional. It wasn't spoken in any human language, but the meaning was somehow simple. It was a message for Earth. We seek dialogue. Those 3 words, translated by scientists through repeated transmissions and mathematical references, shook the world. The vessel beyond the moon wasn't hiding. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't observing silently. It wanted to talk. It wanted connection. For the first time in history, humans were not the ones sending signals into the dark. They were the ones receiving them. Governments debated how to respond. Should they answer? Should they wait? Should they ignore it? The pressure was overwhelming. Billions of people waited for news. Every country wanted to be involved. Every nation wanted to be part of the first contact. But Earth had to speak with one voice. Finally, late that night, humans sent a simple reply back through a controlled transmission station. A reply shaped by careful agreement among many nations. They didn't want to sound aggressive or fearful. They didn't want to appear weak or foolish. They chose words that were calm, open, and respectful. Earth acknowledges your message. We welcome peaceful contact. Those words were broadcast into space, straight toward the hovering vessel. And then the world waited 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, holding its breath. And then something happened that no one could forget. A bright column of light appeared from the spacecraft, gently descending toward Earth like a slow-moving comet. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It looked almost delicate as it drifted downward, glowing softly against the night sky. It landed in an open, uninhabited field far from any city. Monitoring stations reported no harmful energy, no radiation, nothing dangerous. It was as if the visitors had chosen the safest possible way to arrive. Cameras from drones and satellites captured the moment the glowing object unfolded like petals opening from a flower. And from inside, small figures emerged, thin, tall, graceful, moving with calm, measured steps. They carried no weapons. They seemed entirely peaceful. People around the world watched live broadcasts, stunned into silence. For years, movies and stories had imagined what aliens might look like or how they would behave. But this was real. This was happening. These beings, whoever they were, had come with purpose. One of them stepped forward, raised a small device, and projected a message into the air, a visual pattern of symbols and lights. Scientists recognized pieces of the earlier signal woven into it. Slowly, patiently, the message translated into human languages. We come from far away. We come peacefully. We seek understanding. The world felt something it had never felt before, an overwhelming mix of fear, hope, wonder, and unity. Everything humans thought they knew about themselves suddenly felt small, fragile, and extraordinary. At the same time, in that moment, people realized they were not just citizens of their nations. They were citizens of Earth. And the universe had finally knocked on their door. What no one knew, not the scientists, not the governments, not the people watching in awe, was that the visitors had made a terrible assumption. They thought they were the advanced ones. They believed humanity was young, inexperienced, and harmless. They had no idea how wrong they were, because the truth was waiting for them, hidden beneath the surface of this quiet planet, a truth that would shake the entire galaxy once they discovered it. When the visitors stepped onto Earth, the world changed again. For most people watching on their screens, it felt unreal, almost like a scene from a movie. But for the visitors themselves, it felt even stranger. They had traveled across systems with confidence, believing they were arriving on a young, developing world. They expected a quiet, simple species, curious, maybe friendly, but far behind them in progress. That was how they had viewed Earth before arriving. Their first hours on the planet were filled with quiet curiosity. They moved slowly across the landing area, scanning the air, soil, plants, and even the faint waves of sound coming from distant towns. They pointed their tools at everything, taking readings that meant nothing to the people watching, but seemed extremely important to them. Every few moments, they exchanged soft signals with each other, short bursts of sound or light patterns that traveled through the air like whispers. Officials kept a respectful distance. No one wanted to scare the visitors. Security forces didn't carry visible weapons. Only unarmed personnel were allowed near the landing zone. Scientists stood behind transparent shields, waiting patiently, feeling excitement and nervousness blend into one heavy breath. The visitors seemed gentle, calm, maybe even polite. Their movements were smooth and slow, like they had practiced this many times before with other planets. They truly believed they were the experienced ones. They started recording Earth's environment, making notes on everything: the oxygen levels, temperature, mineral content of the ground, the chemical traces in the air. From their quiet gestures and the way they paused to study things, it was clear they were trying to understand the planet deeply. But not once did they look impressed. If anything, they seemed relaxed, almost casual, as if Earth was exactly what they expected. A small world, young and harmless, with a species that might still be figuring out the basics of space science. Whenever they looked at human cameras or drones, their body language showed only mild curiosity, like someone watching a simple machine. A few scientists whispered among themselves, trying to guess what the visitors were thinking. Some thought the aliens were amazed by Earth. Others believed they might be disappointed. In truth, the visitors were neither impressed nor disappointed. They were confident. Too confident. Back in their vessel, the delegates sent reports to their higher council far away in space. The reports described Earth in simple terms: developing, chaotic in some ways, peaceful in others, but overall harmless. They expected Earth to be a place easily guided, maybe even helped along the way, like an older brother helping a younger one walk. The visitors were polite about it, but the assumption was still there. They believed humans were behind them. They believed Earth had only recently discovered signals beyond its atmosphere, only recently touched the edges of space. They had no idea how much humanity had already achieved in secret labs and hidden research stations around the world. The visitors requested a formal meeting, not in a rushing or urgent way, but with the calmness of someone who expects full cooperation. They were ready to talk, ready to teach, ready to lead. Earth, however, had a different kind of readiness: quiet, practical, steady. The meeting took place 2 days later on a neutral ground chosen by both sides. It was an open area with temporary structures set up carefully, keeping the environment peaceful and controlled. Cameras hovered overhead, broadcasting the event across the planet. Billions watched with their hearts pounding, hoping the meeting would go well. Human representatives walked forward, dressed simply but respectfully. They carried no weapons, no signs of aggression, only documents, translators, and scientific tools. They looked calm, but inside, everyone felt the weight of the moment. No one wanted to say the wrong thing. No one wanted to appear weak or foolish in front of beings from another world. The visitors arrived with the same calmness, moving in perfect coordination. As they approached the human representatives, their body language remained gentle and respectful, but with a certain confidence that was easy to spot. They truly believed they were the advanced ones in the room. The meeting began with simple exchanges, greetings, gestures of peace, and attempts to understand each other's ways of communicating. Through light patterns, soft sounds, and a shared translator device, both sides slowly built a bridge of understanding. At first, the visitors asked simple questions about human society, population numbers, types of cultures, how humans managed, their resources, how they traveled across their world. The questions felt like something a teacher might ask a young student. They weren't rude, but they carried an assumption underneath. Human representatives noticed. Meanwhile, the visitors continued sending quiet updates back to their command center. They described humans as emotional, diverse, and adaptable, but also unpredictable. They noted that humans had built impressive cities, but still relied on older technologies in many areas. Some visitors found it charming. Others found it confusing. But none of them saw Earth as an equal. That confidence didn't come from arrogance alone. It came from experience. They had visited other planets before. They had met species that were truly young, species that were gentle and simple. They assumed Earth would be the same, but cracks began to appear in their assumptions as the meeting went on. One moment stood out more than any other. The visitors showed humans a map of the galaxy, an enormous glowing projection that displayed planets, stars, nebulae, and systems unknown to humans. It looked beautiful, like a living painting in the air. Gasps echoed from the human observers, watching from a distance. People at home watching on screens felt chills through their bodies. Then something unexpected happened. The visitors pointed at Earth's position and explained, through the translator, that the planet was located in a quiet region, far from major galactic routes. According to them, Earth was in a slow-growing part of the galaxy. Their tone carried a gentle hint of sympathy, as if they were saying, "You are far from the center of things, but don't worry, we're here to guide you." The humans listened politely, but they exchanged glances with each other. They knew something the visitors didn't know, something that would change the entire tone of the meeting soon enough. Later in the discussions, humans asked questions of their own. They asked about the visitors' technology, what kind of propulsion they used, what systems they came from, and how long their civilization had existed. The visitors answered, but their replies were vague, almost dismissive, as if they didn't see humans as needing deeper explanations. They were cautious, too holding back information they didn't think humans could understand yet. But the visitors' first real shock came when humans began revealing tiny glimpses of their own knowledge, small hints, dropped casually in conversation about concepts the visitors didn't expect Earth to understand. When a human representative mentioned dark energy stabilization, the visitors paused. When another mentioned quantum communication methods, one visitor actually turned its head sharply, the alien version of a surprised expression. They hadn't expected Earth to know these things. At first, they thought it was coincidence. Maybe humans were repeating something they had guessed from the alien signals. But as the meeting continued, more hints emerged. Humans asked careful, smart questions, questions that only someone with advanced understanding would even think of. The visitors began exchanging rapid signals among themselves. Their body language changed slightly. Their confidence didn't disappear, but it began to bend. For the first time since they arrived, they wondered if they had judged Earth too quickly. Still, they kept their calm, sticking to their plan, trying to maintain the image of a guiding older species. But inside their vessel, their communication logs slowly changed in tone. The earlier, relaxed reports became more cautious, more unsure, more curious. Humans show unexpected levels of comprehension. Re-evaluate classification. Potential indicators of advanced research. Further observation necessary. They still assumed humans were behind them, but they no longer thought Earth was simple. That uncertainty grew later that night. After the meeting ended, the visitors requested to tour a scientific facility. They wanted to see how humans studied space, how they built their machines, and what methods they used. They believed this would confirm their assumptions. Instead, they walked into a place that left them quietly stunned. Human researchers demonstrated a decoding system so advanced that it translated parts of the alien language in hours. A process that usually took entire teams of trained delegates in the visitors' own civilization was being matched by humans working with limited information. The visitors didn't react outwardly, but inside, they knew something was off. This wasn't the behavior of a primitive species. This wasn't what they expected from Earth. The visitors had arrived believing they were the teachers. The visitors had arrived with confidence, believing they were far more advanced than humans. They thought the Earthlings were young, curious, and harmless. But in the days that followed, everything they assumed began to shift. They didn't notice it at first. They were careful, polite, and calculated in every movement, but the truth slowly revealed itself. Humanity was not what they expected. Humanity was far more capable than they could imagine. The first signs came quietly, almost casually. During another series of meetings, the humans showed the visitors a map of energy networks spanning the planet, networks that were controlled, efficient, and highly secure. The visitors observed, noting the lines of data, the flow of energy, and the way humans had managed to connect cities, countries, and even continents. To the visitors, this looked simple, but when they tried to trace the systems themselves, they found the technology unexpectedly complex. Humans had achieved what some alien civilizations took centuries to master. Next came a demonstration of communication networks. Humans had quietly developed a method of transmitting data across vast distances, faster than the aliens had believed possible. It was not just communication. It was precise, secure, and surprisingly resilient. When the visitors realized the scale of the systems humans had built, there was a moment of silence among them. They exchanged signals rapidly, almost in a panic, recalculating everything they thought they knew about the planet. The humans, meanwhile, noticed nothing unusual in their demeanor at first. They were polite, professional, and calm, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside, every human present understood the weight of this moment. The visitors had come expecting to lead the conversation, to show superiority, to guide humanity. And now, the balance of power felt uncertain. One evening, the visitors requested a demonstration of Earth's military technology, not because they expected war, but because they wanted to assess potential threats. The humans agreed, arranging a small-scale demonstration in a controlled environment. What happened next stunned the aliens completely. They watched as humans operated machines that combined speed, precision, and energy efficiency beyond the visitors' calculations. The technology was not flashy or overwhelming, but it worked with astonishing intelligence. Every movement, every calculation, every adjustment was precise. The aliens, who had assumed humans were behind, could not fully predict or control the demonstration. Every simulation they ran had been based on the assumption that humans would make mistakes, yet humans did not. They adapted instantly, recalculated, and optimized. The aliens' internal discussions became tense. Quiet flashes of light and sound were exchanged among them, signals filled with worry and disbelief. One of their delegates recorded in the log, Human adaptability exceeds expectations. Reassessment required. For humans, the day seemed calm and orderly. Observers, technicians, and representatives all carried on with professional composure. But inside each human, a sense of quiet pride grew. They had prepared for this moment in every way possible, and now the visitors were learning what humanity was capable of. Not in words, but in action. The next revelation came when the visitors noticed how quickly humans learned their technology. What had once been incomprehensible patterns of energy, light, and mathematics became understandable in hours. Humans asked questions, made adjustments, and even suggested improvements. The visitors tried to hide their surprise, but it was evident in their careful, slower movements and in the cautious signals they exchanged among themselves. The visitors had traveled across galaxies, expecting to meet a species that needed guidance, perhaps mentorship. They expected humans to be curious, but ultimately limited. But the humans' speed of comprehension, their intelligence, and their confidence began to challenge that assumption. They were not behind, they were equal, if not ahead, in ways the aliens had underestimated. Even more striking was humanity's strategic thinking. In one simulation designed to test problem-solving under pressure, humans managed to predict patterns and outcomes that the visitors themselves had not anticipated. Each scenario, designed to be complex and confusing, was met with calm calculation, steady observation, and effective solutions. The visitors began to whisper among themselves in their own language, their signals rapid and urgent. They were no longer confident. The humans, on the other hand, were completely unaware of the visitors' growing concern. They treated the aliens with courtesy, guided them through their demonstrations, and answered questions carefully, but without fear. They were polite, cooperative, and calm, understanding the importance of first impressions, but they were quietly showing the visitors that they were not simple or weak. The visitors started comparing humans to other civilizations they had encountered. They remembered other planets they had visited, where the species were much younger, much less capable. Humans were different. Humans adapted. Humans planned. Humans learned at a pace no other species had demonstrated. And most importantly, humans could innovate. At one point, a human researcher casually mentioned a concept of energy manipulation that the visitors had considered highly experimental in their own civilization. The aliens paused. They repeated the term through their own translator, their signals showing a rare note of shock. No species at their level had ever suggested such ideas in casual conversation. It was usually reserved for long research periods, carefully calculated simulations, or centuries of development. And yet, humans were discussing it openly, with confidence and clarity. That evening, after the demonstrations and discussions ended, the visitors returned to their vessel. They projected signals to their home council, explaining what they had seen. Their words were careful, but the tone had changed. Earlier reports had assumed Earth was simple and safe. Now, their observations were filled with caution and uncertainty. Humans demonstrate rapid learning, one delegate recorded. Technology exceeds expectations in several areas. Adaptability and innovation are remarkable. Reclassification recommended. Potential for strategic dominance is high. Meanwhile, humans continued with their daily routines. They were not boastful. They were not aggressive. They were simply themselves, calm and careful, doing what they had always done, working, observing, and learning. To the visitors, this quiet confidence was unsettling. They expected fear, awe, or confusion. Instead, they saw a species that was prepared, capable, and unafraid. The first hints of real concern came when the visitors attempted to test Earth's sensors and satellites. They believed humans would struggle to detect the subtle interferences. Yet humans noticed them almost immediately. They had systems that monitored unusual activity, systems designed for protection, communication, and understanding. Humans were aware without revealing how much they knew. It was a skill the visitors had not anticipated. The realization began to sink in slowly, almost painfully. These humans were not naive. They were not weak. They were not a young civilization in need of guidance. Humanity was already operating on a level that demanded respect. They could learn, adapt, and anticipate in ways that other species could not. For the first time, the visitors questioned their assumptions. They had traveled far across the galaxy, believing themselves to be the experienced guides. They had expected to meet curiosity, wonder, and perhaps chaos. But what they found was competence, intelligence, and quiet strength. By the end of the third day, the visitors' calm confidence had shifted. Their movements were slower, more deliberate. Their communications with each other were rapid but careful, filled with signals of caution and analysis. They began to realize that Earth was not a place to mentor or guide. Earth was a species to observe closely and perhaps respect. The humans had not intended to intimidate. They had simply acted naturally, showing what they could do. Their scientists had shared knowledge carefully. Their military had demonstrated capability without aggression. Their engineers had shown innovation and problem-solving. And their leaders had maintained calm authority. All of it added up to a single, undeniable conclusion for the visitors. Humanity was not what they expected. Humanity was powerful, intelligent, and unpredictable. And while the humans watched and listened politely, unaware of the visitors' growing concern, the aliens quietly admitted to themselves, this was not a species that could be underestimated. This was not a species to be casually guided. The first cracks in their assumption were now obvious. They had expected a young, developing civilization. They had assumed superiority, control, and guidance. And now, all of that was gone. They were beginning to realize that humans might not only be equal, they might be far stronger than they had imagined. The visitors left that day with new instructions from their council. Observation continued, but caution was now the priority. Every movement, every signal, every interaction would be carefully measured. They no longer assumed humanity could be led. They assumed humanity could challenge them. And for the humans, the world continued, quiet but confident. They had not yet fully understood how much they had surprised their visitors. They had simply been themselves, calm, intelligent, and capable. Yet unknowingly, they were beginning to shift the balance of perception in the galaxy. What the visitors did not yet know, but would soon discover, was that this was only the beginning. Humanity's true cap. By the time the fourth day of contact arrived, the visitors had already begun to rethink everything they thought they knew about Earth. They had traveled across galaxies, meeting countless civilizations, some weak, some strong, but none like humanity. They had assumed Earth was a young, simple planet with a species that was curious but limited. And yet, in just a few short days, they had begun to see evidence that they had underestimated humans completely. The first sign came when humans offered to show how they detected and monitored the visitors' own spacecraft. It was meant as a demonstration of transparency and good faith, but for the visitors, it was shocking. They assumed their cloaking technology was beyond the comprehension of Earth. They had traveled light years expecting their vessels to remain hidden, untraceable, and secure. And yet, humans had already detected subtle energy signatures, fluctuations in gravity, and patterns in the surrounding space that revealed the vessel's location. The visitors paused, exchanging rapid signals among themselves. In their language, the words were almost incomprehensible to translate. They sounded like alarm and disbelief combined. The humans did not show any sign of intimidation or fear. They explained calmly how their observation stations worked, the principles behind their sensors, and the analytical methods they used to detect energy anomalies. The visitors listened, carefully noting every detail. They tried to maintain their calm exterior, but inside, every delegate's calculation had to be recalculated. Every assumption they had made about Earth and humanity was suddenly in question. Next, the humans demonstrated a series of strategic simulations. They were careful, modest, and controlled, showing only a fraction of their capabilities. But even this small glimpse was enough to make the visitors uneasy. Humans were able to anticipate patterns and adjust strategies faster than the visitors. Most advanced algorithms could predict. Every test they had designed, every scenario they had carefully prepared, was met with a solution that was both efficient and elegant. For the visitors, this was unprecedented. They had never encountered a species that could match or exceed their calculations so quickly. Their council had warned them that Earth might have potential, but seeing it in practice was far more unsettling than they expected. As the day progressed, the visitors began to observe humans in ways they had never done before. They watched scientists and engineers at work in labs, quietly taking notes, making adjustments, and improving existing technology. They noticed how humans collaborated across continents, sharing knowledge instantly and solving complex problems together. In the past, the visitors had always assumed that civilizations progressed slowly, limited by internal conflicts and lack of coordination. Humanity seemed to defy this entirely. Later, the visitors requested to observe Earth's communication systems in action. They expected to see a primitive network with limits and flaws, easy to analyze and predict. Instead, they found a system so robust, interconnected, and adaptable that it seemed almost alive. Humans could detect interference, reroute messages instantly, and even anticipate potential problems before they happened. The visitors' technology was sophisticated, but it had been designed for predictable systems. Earth's network was unpredictable, adaptive, and intelligent in a way the visitors had not considered. Throughout the day, small details continued to unsettle the visitors. They noticed how humans handled pressure calmly, how they remained polite and professional even when questions became challenging. They observed creativity in unexpected areas, how humans designed solutions that were simple yet effective, how they combined ideas from different disciplines to create something entirely new. Every interaction revealed a species that was resilient, adaptable, and surprisingly fearless. By late afternoon, the visitors' internal discussions became more urgent. They began using signals that indicated caution and reevaluation. "This species is unpredictable," one delegate signaled. "Potential for strategic dominance may be higher than estimated." Another responded, "We cannot assume guidance or mentorship. Reclassification required." Humans, meanwhile, continued with their demonstrations, unaware of the growing concern among the visitors. They had prepared for this moment, not to intimidate, but to show competence and build trust. Every action was measured, every explanation clear, and every answer precise. The calm confidence of humans contrasted sharply with the visitors' inner tension. The turning point came during a demonstration of energy systems. Humans showed a prototype technology that allowed them to manipulate energy efficiently, cleanly, and with minimal waste. It was not yet fully operational, but the principles behind it were clear and advanced. The visitors had seen similar experiments in other civilizations, but this approach was unique, simple, clever, and practical. As the visitors analyzed the system, they realized it could have far-reaching implications. Not only was it advanced, but it also revealed humans' ability to innovate rapidly. They could take abstract concepts, test them, refine them, and implement them in ways the visitors had never seen before. For the first time, the delegates began to feel cautious, not because humans had shown hostility, but because humans had shown capability beyond their expectations. The visitors began consulting their historical records. trying to understand how a species like this had developed. They reviewed data about Earth's conflicts, its survival through disasters, its rapid technological advancements, and its ability to adapt to change. They found patterns of resilience and innovation that no other civilization they had encountered displayed. Every record they examined reinforced the same conclusion. Humans were not ordinary. Humans were exceptional. During the evening, the visitors observed a planning session among human scientists and leaders. It was a quiet meeting filled with discussion, calculations, and careful analysis. Yet the efficiency and clarity of thought were remarkable. Humans debated solutions calmly, proposed multiple approaches, and quickly reached consensus. The visitors could sense that this was not just intelligence, it was collective strategy, an ability to work together with focus, creativity, and foresight. As the night fell, the visitors sent another set of reports back to their home council. This time, the language was cautious, filled with uncertainty. Humans show strategic insight beyond anticipated levels, one delegate signaled. Technological development may exceed preliminary projections. Observation required. Proceed with caution. The humans did not know the depth of concern they had caused. They had simply acted naturally, demonstrating skill, intelligence, and composure. They had not sought to impress, intimidate, or dominate. They had simply been themselves. And yet, in doing so, they had begun to shift the visitors' perception entirely. By the end of the fourth day, the visitors' confidence had been replaced by careful respect. They no longer assumed leadership or superiority. They began to observe more cautiously, analyze more deeply, and rethink every plan they had made for interacting with Earth. For humans, the day ended quietly. They returned to their routines, unaware of how much they had impressed and unsettled the visitors. Scientists continued their work, engineers refined prototypes, and leaders prepared for further discussions. The planet remained calm, yet the subtle shift in power was already underway. The visitors had arrived, believing they would guide, mentor, and oversee a young civilization. Instead, they found themselves facing a species capable of rapid learning, innovation, and strategy. Humanity had not yet revealed its full strength, but even these early interactions were enough to change the visitors' understanding forever. And as the night sky settled over Earth, both species rested, each in its own way. Humans unaware of the full effect they had on their visitors, and the visitors quietly acknowledging that Earth was no ordinary planet. A new balance had begun to emerge, one that would shape the future of the galaxy in ways no one could yet imagine. By the time the fourth day closed, it was clear that humanity's quiet strength, adaptability, and intelligence had begun to challenge assumptions that had stood for centuries. The visitors had learned something they had not expected. Earth was not a species to be guided. It was a species to be respected, and the galaxy, just beyond the night sky, was beginning to take notice. By the fifth day, the visitors had begun to fully grasp that their initial assumptions about Earth were completely wrong. They had come expecting a young, developing civilization, a species to guide and mentor. They had expected curiosity, fear, and perhaps confusion. What they found instead was competence, intelligence, and calm confidence that made them reconsider everything they thought they knew. The day began with a series of demonstrations humans had planned carefully. These demonstrations were not meant to intimidate or shock. They were meant to share knowledge, establish trust, and show transparency. But as the visitors watched, they realized that what they were seeing was far beyond what they had anticipated. Humans began by presenting a new energy system, one that was still in its prototype phase. It was small, efficient, and surprisingly powerful. The system could store enormous amounts of energy, convert it with near-perfect efficiency, and redistribute it where needed almost instantly. The visitors had seen similar systems in other civilizations, but none had been this compact, this reliable, or this practical. As the visitors analyzed the system, their signals became rapid, urgent, and filled with notes of caution. They had expected humans to struggle with the principles, to make errors, to show limitations. Instead, humans explained the system clearly, answered questions with precision, and even suggested improvements to optimize its efficiency. The visitors exchanged signals among themselves, clearly shocked. Next, humans demonstrated advancements in transportation and mobility. Small vehicles designed for rapid movement showed intelligence in navigation that was unexpected. They could adapt to changing environments, calculate routes instantly, and communicate with other vehicles to avoid collisions. The visitors had assumed humans would have simple machines, but the level of integration and adaptability left them silently alarmed. It wasn't just the technology that impressed the visitors. It was the humans themselves, their calm focus, their ability to solve problems on the spot, their quick learning, and their collaboration. Humans worked together seamlessly, combining knowledge from multiple fields to create solutions that the visitors had not even imagined. During a demonstration of quantum communication, the visitors were truly stunned. Humans had developed a method to transmit information instantaneously across vast distances with precision and security. It was not perfect yet, but the principles were clear, and the implications were enormous. The visitors knew that such technology could change the balance of power anywhere in the galaxy. They had expected humans to be naive or slow to develop advanced concepts. Instead, humans were already experimenting with ideas that even advanced civilizations had struggled to implement. The visitors' own calculations had to be recalculated. Their prior assumptions that humans were developing slowly, that they would need guidance, that their potential was limited, were proving false. Each demonstration, each explanation, each calm response from humans chipped away at the confidence they had carried across the galaxy. Then came a moment that truly shook the visitors. Humans demonstrated a prototype defense system. It was not aggressive. It was not designed for attack. It was designed for protection. Yet it worked with a level of intelligence, efficiency, and adaptability that the visitors had never seen. Every simulation they had run in their own laboratories, every model they had tested across galaxies, had assumed limits to human capability. But humans could anticipate patterns, adjust strategies, and implement solutions faster than any simulation the visitors had created. For the first time, the visitors felt something like unease, a recognition that humans were not only capable of understanding their technology, but could potentially surpass it. The visitors held quiet discussions among themselves, their signals urgent and full of caution. The species is advanced beyond preliminary assessment, one delegate signaled. Adaptability and innovation exceed projections. Reevaluate potential threat level. Another replied, observation only may no longer suffice. Consider strategic recalibration. Meanwhile, humans remained calm, polite, and focused. They had no intention of intimidating the visitors. They were simply demonstrating what they could do, as naturally as they would show their own work to colleagues. Yet every action, every solution, every explanation revealed a depth of capability that the visitors had not expected. Later that day, humans conducted a demonstration that combined multiple systems. Energy, transportation, communication, and defense were all connected in a single coordinated simulation. The humans managed the system seamlessly, responding to challenges instantly, adapting to variables, and achieving objectives with precision. The visitors watched closely. They could see every calculation, every adjustment, every response. And yet, they could not fully predict or control the outcome. Humans were not following a script. They were thinking, learning, and innovating in real time. The visitors realized, perhaps for the first time, that humanity's greatest strength was not in machines or technology alone, but in the human mind itself, the ability to adapt, to solve problems, and to innovate without limits. By evening, the visitors were openly cautious. They began to discuss with their home council whether humanity should continue to be classified as a young civilization or whether a new category was needed. Their calculations suggested that humans had the potential to surpass many advanced civilizations within a surprisingly short time. The delegates exchanged signals filled with urgency and respect. Humans, again, were unaware of the depth of concern they had caused. They ended the day quietly, continuing their work with calm focus. Scientists returned to their laboratories, engineers refined prototypes, and leaders prepared notes for future meetings. The planet remained calm on the surface, but underneath, the balance of perception was shifting dramatically. The visitors began to understand something else. They were witnessing a species that could not easily be controlled or predicted. Every time they tried to assess humanity's limits, humans revealed new capabilities, new insights, and new methods of problem solving. The visitors realized that their role as guides or mentors was no longer possible. Humans were already a species with immense potential, intelligence, and power. That night, the visitors communicated with their council in a message filled with caution and careful language. Humans demonstrate capability exceeding initial projections, one delegate signaled. Technological innovation, strategic thinking, and adaptability are remarkable. Re-evaluate interaction protocol. Maintain observation, but approach with respect. On Earth, humans continued their routines, unaware of how deeply they had unsettled their visitors. They were not seeking recognition, fear, or power. They were simply being themselves, calm, competent, and capable. Yet in doing so, they had revealed a strength that was impossible to ignore. The visitors began to make plans for a new approach. They would no longer assume superiority. They would no longer approach humanity as students to be guided. They would observe carefully, respect the intelligence and adaptability of humans, and consider the implications for the wider galaxy. By the end of the 5th day, it was clear that the first real shift in the balance of power had begun. Humans had not sought to dominate or intimidate, but their actions, intelligence, and innovation had already made a lasting impression on the visitors. The species that had arrived expecting guidance was now facing a civilization that demanded respect. And as the night settled over Earth, humans continued their work, unaware that they had already begun to reshape the visitors' understanding of power, intelligence, and potential. The galaxy would never view Earth in the same way again. The visitors' journey, planned with confidence and certainty, had turned into a careful reconsideration of strategy. They had come expecting to guide and mentor a young civilization, but instead they had found a species that could match or surpass them in ways they had never imagined. And humanity, as always, continued calmly, naturally, and unknowingly, ready to reveal even more of its true potential in the days ahead. The 6th day began quietly, but there was an energy in the air that no one could ignore. Humanity had already shown the visitors incredible intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. By now, the visitors were no longer confident, no longer assuming superiority. They had begun to see Earth not as a young, developing civilization, but as something far more powerful, capable, and unpredictable than they had ever imagined. Humans started the day with another demonstration, but this one was different. It was not about technology alone. It was about showing how humans worked together, how they thought strategically, and how they could solve problems that had never been solved before. The visitors arrived with careful curiosity, expecting a normal demonstration, but they were about to witness something extraordinary. The humans began with a simple task: coordinating multiple complex systems at the same time. They connected energy, transportation, communication, and defense in a seamless network. Machines worked together intelligently, while humans monitored, adjusted, and optimized the flow of data and energy in real time. What the visitors had thought would be a test of machinery turned out to be a test of strategy, creativity, and coordination, and humans excelled in every way. The visitors were stunned. Their signals, once calm and precise, now buzzed with rapid calculations, warnings, and reassessments. The species is beyond expected capability, one delegate signaled. They are integrating multiple disciplines with speed and precision. We did not predict. Another responded, "This is not development, it is mastery. Re-evaluate interaction protocol immediately." Humans continued calmly, answering questions, explaining methods, and solving unexpected problems as they appeared. Nothing was rushed, nothing was forced, and yet every action demonstrated intelligence far beyond what the visitors had assumed. They were precise, adaptable, and creative in ways that the visitors had never seen. As the day progressed, humans began to show something else, the ability to anticipate and respond to challenges before they even arose. During simulations designed to test problem-solving, humans could predict patterns, adjust strategies, and implement solutions instantly. It was not luck or guesswork. It was careful analysis, innovation, and foresight. The visitors, who had assumed they would guide or mentor, found themselves quietly learning from humans instead. One particularly remarkable moment came when humans demonstrated a system that could monitor multiple areas of the planet simultaneously, detect anomalies, and respond with incredible speed. The system combined artificial intelligence, human decision-making, and advanced technology in a way that was seamless and nearly flawless. The visitors tried to predict how humans would respond to certain challenges, but every time they thought they had an answer, humans found a better, faster, and more effective solution. The visitors began exchanging urgent signals among themselves. "Human adaptability exceeds projections," one delegate signaled. "They are capable of independent innovation beyond our expectations. Reassess strategic assumptions." Another replied, "This species cannot be guided or underestimated. Proceed with extreme caution." Despite their growing concern, the visitors remained polite and calm. They continued to interact with humans respectfully, observing every detail and quietly noting every capability. They were learning fast, but the realization that humans were not a species to be led, but a species to be respected, was becoming clear. Later in the day, humans conducted a demonstration of energy manipulation on a scale that the visitors had never witnessed before. They carefully showed how energy could be collected, stored, and distributed efficiently across vast distances. The principles were advanced, but the humans explained them in a clear, simple way that even the visitors could follow. This was not meant to impress. It was simply humanity being practical and careful, but the effect on the visitors was profound. The visitors began to communicate with their home council more urgently than ever. Earth demonstrates technological and strategic potential far beyond initial assessment, one delegate reported. They are not naive. They are not weak. They are capable of independent and innovative action on a large scale. Reclassify immediately. Humans, meanwhile, remained humble, calm, and composed. They were aware of the visitors' presence and interest, but they did not seek to dominate or intimidate. They were simply doing what humans had always done, working, learning, and sharing knowledge responsibly. Their calm confidence was almost startling to the visitors, who had expected fear, awe, or confusion. Instead, they saw competence, intelligence, and patience. By evening, the visitors had fully realized the truth. Humanity was not only capable of learning and adapting, they were capable of surpassing expectations in ways that could alter the balance of power. Their initial assumptions had been completely wrong. Humans were not a species to guide or mentor. They were a species to respect, and perhaps even to fear. The visitors began to speak among themselves in urgent, careful signals. "This species may be a galactic peer sooner than we imagined," one delegate signaled. "Their capacity for innovation, strategy, and adaptation is exceptional. We must approach carefully and with respect." Another added, "We have underestimated them. They are not just a civilization, they are a rising power." Humans had already begun to sense the shift. They noticed subtle changes in the visitors' behavior, their increased caution, their careful observation, and their slower, more deliberate movements. Humans did not exploit this advantage. They continued their work calmly and carefully, demonstrating capability without arrogance. Their actions were intelligent, responsible, and steady. Later that night, humans conducted one final demonstration, a combination of all their systems, including energy, transportation, communication, and defense. They coordinated everything seamlessly, showing not only technological skill, but also strategy, creativity, and adaptability. The visitors watched, unable to fully predict or control the outcome. Every challenge that appeared was met with calm problem-solving and rapid innovation. By the end of the demonstration, the visitors' respect for humans had grown into full acknowledgement. They no longer saw Earth as a developing world. They no longer assumed superiority. They now understood that humans were a species capable of greatness on a galactic scale. In a quiet moment, the visitors admitted something to themselves, almost like a whisper. "We came to guide. Instead, we have learned. This species is extraordinary. They are not just capable, they are supreme." Humans, as always, remained calm and composed. They had not intended to intimidate or dominate. They had simply acted with intelligence, creativity, and responsibility. And in doing so, they had revealed their true strength. By the end of the 6th day, a new reality had emerged. The visitors would no longer approach humans with assumptions of control. They would approach with respect, caution, and a willingness to learn. Humanity had quietly, naturally, and completely shifted the balance of perception. They had become a species that could not be underestimated, a species that could one day shape the galaxy itself. And as the night sky settled over Earth, both humans and visitors reflected in their own ways. Humans continued their work calmly, unaware of how profoundly they had changed the visitors' understanding of intelligence, capability, and power. The visitors, meanwhile, began to prepare for a new approach, one built on respect, careful observation, and recognition that Earth was not a world to be guided, but a world to be acknowledged as a rising galactic power. For the first time in history, humanity had fully revealed its potential, not through force or aggression, but through intelligence, creativity, and calm confidence. The galaxy and everyone who would come to know it would never look at Earth the same way again. And so, the story of first contact ended not with fear or domination, but with respect, understanding, and the quiet beginning of a new chapter. Humanity had shown the visitors, and perhaps the universe, that they were capable of greatness beyond expectation. A new era had begun, and Earth had taken its first step as a true galactic power.